Vai отсюда.
Archaeologists finally revealed the full footage captured inside the moving stone door beneath the Giant's Causeway, and according to multiple researchers connected to the expedition, the chamber behind it was never empty at all.
Oh, well, this is exciting. Earlier today, we're being told tourists and National Trust rangers saw the legendary Finn disappear into a magical doorway within the rock face here at the Giant's Causeway.
The first thing you need to understand is that none of this was ever supposed to become public. Not the thermal scans, not the leaked body cam recordings, and definitely not the footage recovered from inside the chamber itself. For nearly 5 months after the original drone clips surfaced online, the section of coastline where the stone door appeared remained sealed behind reinforced steel barriers and geological hazard signage. Officially, authorities blamed coastal instability and erosion damage caused by Atlantic storms. Unofficially, the restrictions began after researchers scanning beneath the basalt started detecting movement where no movement should have existed. At first, the anomalies looked minor: unusual heat signatures, irregular density beneath the cliff face, subsurface cavities inconsistent with the geological structure of the Giant's Causeway. But then the scans started repeating the same impossible detail: multiple upright figures standing motionless inside a hollow chamber beneath solid volcanic rock. The footage itself was captured accidentally. Local drone operator Kieran Doyle had been filming the coastline shortly after sunrise when he noticed movement along one section of basalt near the waterline. At first, he assumed it was a landslide or collapsing stone caused by erosion. Then the cliff moved outward. Not shattered, not collapsed, opened. The basalt slab shifted smoothly away from the cliff face, revealing complete darkness behind it for approximately 11 seconds before sealing shut again. No grinding, no friction, no debris falling into the ocean below, just smooth movement like the stone had been designed to open from the inside. The clip spread online almost immediately. Most people dismissed it within hours. Fake footage, AI generation, optical distortion. But privately, several researchers working near the Giant's Causeway reportedly became increasingly alarmed by what the thermal scans underneath the cliff continued showing afterward. Because according to leaked geological notes, the figures inside the chamber were not stationary anymore. They were changing position between scans. One anonymous researcher later admitted the movement itself was not the most disturbing part. The consistency was, every new scan reinforced the previous one. The same chamber, the same figures, the same impossible thermal signatures beneath millions of tons of basalt. Several members of the original survey team reportedly stopped storing scan data digitally entirely after internal archive files began disappearing from shared systems. Another researcher allegedly started keeping handwritten notes after becoming convinced somebody was remotely accessing thermal logs connected to the site. And according to leaked correspondence between 2 archaeological departments in Belfast, at least one member of the survey quietly recommended permanently sealing the cliff section beneath reinforced concrete before further investigations continued. That recommendation was rejected immediately. No official explanation was attached. Then the stone door opened again. This time, the motion lasted over 2 full minutes, long enough for low-light camera systems to stabilize, long enough for the darkness behind the entrance to become visible, and long enough for researchers reviewing the footage to realize something had changed inside the chamber. Originally, thermal scans appeared to show 6 upright figures standing near the rear wall. Now there were only 5. One of them was gone. But the footage captured something else too. Near the back of the chamber behind the remaining figures, a smaller shape was visible, partially kneeling against the wall. Unlike the others, its proportions appeared almost human. That was the moment the expedition was approved. Not publicly, not officially. A small archaeological team entered the chamber the following night shortly after 4 a.m. carrying portable floodlights, oxygen monitors, thermal imaging equipment, handheld cameras, and ground radar scanners. According to leaked audio recovered from the expedition, almost nobody spoke once the stone started moving. One archaeologist later admitted the silence disturbed them more than the movement itself. 20 tons of basalt shifting without resistance. without sound, like the stone had somehow stopped behaving like normal rock entirely. Then the entrance fully opened, and for the first time, archaeologists finally stepped inside the chamber behind the moving stone door. The first thing they noticed was the temperature. Outside, Atlantic winds had pushed the coastline close to freezing. Inside the chamber, every thermometer stabilized between 68 and 71 degrees almost immediately. Warm, dry, stable. One researcher can actually be heard whispering, "That's impossible." The basalt surrounding the chamber should have conducted heat outward continuously. Nothing sealed underground remains thermally stable for geological timescales. Yet according to the expedition recordings, the environment inside the chamber felt maintained somehow. That exact word appears repeatedly throughout the leaked notes: maintained. The second thing researchers noticed was the size. The chamber extended far deeper than any radar scan originally suggested. From outside the cliff face, geological equipment estimated a relatively small cavity beneath the basalt. But once inside, the dimensions no longer made sense. The walls appeared too distant, the curvature too gradual, even the acoustics behaved incorrectly. Footsteps echoed from directions that did not match the visible structure of the chamber itself. One body cam recording repeatedly captures low reverberations continuing nearly 2 full seconds longer than physically possible inside a room of that estimated size. At one point, a researcher quietly says, "It's bigger inside than it should be." Nobody responds, because by then the floodlights had finally reached the rear wall, and the figures became visible for the first time. 5 of them remained standing upright near the back of the chamber, approximately 7 feet tall, thin, elongated, covered in a dark shell-like outer surface reflecting light strangely beneath the floodlamps. Not stone, not bone. Several researchers later compared the texture to cooled glass or burned ceramic. And according to the body cam footage, the chamber itself was not silent. There was a sound beneath the floor, low frequency, rhythmic, repeating every few seconds. At first, the team assumed the vibration was equipment interference caused by unstable geology. Then Dr. Ian Gallagher quietly asked, "Is that coming from them?" Nobody answered, because by then they had already realized something worse. The chamber was not empty. Something else was inside with them. Near the rear wall, partially obscured behind the standing figures, the expedition lights finally illuminated the smaller shape visible in the earlier scans. It was kneeling.
Vai, assoba.
The expedition team captured even more and stranger footage of the creature that we couldn't fit into this video, but we've made that extended footage available in our Patreon for those interested, link below. Unlike the larger figures, its outer surface appeared fractured heavily around the shoulders and neck, and beneath the fractures, something pale was visible underneath, something softer, something disturbingly human. One member of the expedition reportedly stopped speaking entirely after seeing it. Another immediately asks if they should leave before the entrance seals again, but according to the recordings, nobody moved. The researchers simply stood there staring at the kneeling figure while the low pulse beneath the floor continued vibrating through the chamber. One archaeologist later admitted that the worst part was not fear, it was familiarity. The proportions of the kneeling figure looked wrong and human at the same time, not monstrous, not animalistic, recognizable. Then something else started happening inside the chamber. The air pressure changed. At first, nobody mentioned it directly, but several members of the expedition later described feeling discomfort in their ears, similar to descending rapidly underwater. One body cam microphone captures repeated clicking noises as researchers swallow and attempt to equalize pressure. The strange part was that none of the oxygen monitors detected any atmospheric instability. No gas leaks, no oxygen depletion, nothing dangerous. Yet the deeper the team moved into the chamber, the heavier the air seemed to feel. One archaeologist quietly asks if anybody else can hear breathing. Nobody responds to him, but approximately 14 seconds later, another member of the expedition turns suddenly toward the rear wall as if hearing the same thing. The sound itself never becomes fully audible on the recordings, only fragments. A faint layered noise beneath the pulse vibrating through the floor, almost like distant inhalation echoing through stone. And according to leaked thermal logs recovered afterward, that was the exact moment the chamber itself began changing. The pulse beneath the floor started accelerating, faster, closer together, and several of the standing figures began registering increasing thermal outputs simultaneously. 101 degrees, 104, 108. One researcher can actually be heard whispering, "They're heating up." Then the markings became visible. The walls surrounding the chamber were covered in repeating geometric grooves extending vertically through the basalt itself. Hundreds of them, some shallow, others deeply carved into the stone, and none matched any known archaeological patterns from the British Isles. No Celtic parallels, no medieval carving structures, no recognizable script systems. The grooves curved around the chamber walls in concentric patterns almost resembling resonance diagrams or waveform structures. One section near the rear wall appeared darker than the rest, as if the basalt itself had been burned repeatedly over a very long period of time. And directly in front of it, the floor had been worn smooth, as if something had stood there continuously for years. One of the archaeologists reportedly compared the markings to circuitry more than language. Another later described them as looking grown into the basalt instead of carved. That detail disturbed several members of the expedition afterward because the grooves did not appear damaged by erosion at all. If anything, they looked newer than the surrounding stone itself. Then one of the archaeologists noticed the footprints, not leading deeper into the chamber, leading out of it. The impressions were narrow, elongated, almost human in structure, but too distorted to match any member of the expedition team. Only one line of prints existed, one set leaving the chamber, nothing returning. That was the moment several researchers later described as psychologically breaking the expedition, because until then there had still been room for abstraction. Unknown geology, biological anomalies, thermal distortion, but footprints imply movement, behavior, decision. Something had walked out of the chamber before researchers ever entered it, and according to the untouched motion cameras monitoring the cliff outside, nothing had exited through the stone door itself. Then the floodlights began dimming, not failing completely, pulsing. Every few seconds, the brightness weakened slightly before stabilizing again. At first, nobody paid attention. Then the synchronization became obvious. Every low vibration beneath the floor matched the fluctuation in the lights exactly. Pulse, dim, pulse, dim. The thermal specialist suddenly turns toward the standing figures and quietly says, "They changed position." The camera pans upward immediately. One of the figures was no longer facing the rear wall. It had turned slightly toward the group, only a few degrees, but enough that every researcher inside the chamber noticed immediately. One archaeologist backs directly into the wall, trying to move toward the exit. Another begins insisting repeatedly that the movement must have been perspective distortion caused by the floodlights. Then the kneeling figure moved, not dramatically, just enough. A slight adjustment of the shoulders, a small shift in posture, but unmistakable. One archaeologist immediately starts shouting for everyone to leave. The pulse beneath the floor accelerates again, and then the chamber walls begin glowing faintly beneath the basalt itself, not bright, not cinematic, more like dull heat moving through buried circuitry beneath stone. The illumination spreads around the chamber in repeating circular sequences, synchronizing perfectly with the vibration beneath the floor. And according to the thermal logs, every standing figure simultaneously increased in temperature again. 109 degrees, 112, 115. Then all recording equipment inside the chamber briefly failed simultaneously. Approximately 19 seconds of footage are missing entirely. When the cameras reactivate, the expedition team is already running toward the entrance. Several researchers are screaming at each other. One floodlight swings wildly toward the rear wall, briefly illuminating the kneeling figure again. Only now, its head appears raised slightly toward the camera, and beneath the fractured outer shell around the face, something human-looking is visible underneath. Not fully exposed, just enough. An eye socket, part of a cheek. Pale skin beneath the dark outer surface. One researcher later admitted that was the exact moment he became convinced the chamber was never ancient in the way they originally believed. Because whatever existed inside the room did not look dead. It looked unfinished somehow. The team escaped the chamber seconds before the entrance sealed shut again. No member of the expedition ever attempted re-entry afterward. Several reportedly suffered severe psychological distress within days of the incident. One researcher allegedly resigned permanently from field archaeology less than 2 weeks later. Another reportedly stopped sleeping entirely without lights on after returning from the expedition. A third member of the survey team later admitted he refused to review the complete body cam recordings after hearing unexplained voices during the missing 19-second blackout. According to him, the sounds did not resemble language, more like multiple tones vibrating together simultaneously. Publicly, authorities later claimed the expedition discovered unusual geothermal instability beneath the Giant's Causeway, requiring indefinite restriction of the surrounding coastline. No mention of figures, no mention of movement, no mention of the chamber. But fragments still leaked online afterward. Thermal stills, partial body cam clips, audio recordings, and according to multiple sources connected to the expedition, the footage released publicly represented only a fraction of what researchers originally recovered from inside the chamber, including several longer thermal recordings captured after the walls began glowing, isolated audio files recovered during the missing 19-second blackout, and one extended sequence allegedly showing the kneeling figure standing moments before the team fled. We've uploaded the extended expedition footage, additional thermal recordings, and the complete uncut chamber archive to our private Patreon for those who want to explore deeper into what archaeologists reportedly discovered beneath the Giant's Causeway. Link is below in the pinned comment, but the most disturbing discovery happened later. Roughly 2 weeks after the expedition ended, one final thermal scan was conducted before equipment removal from the site. The standing figures were gone. All of them. The chamber itself appeared almost completely empty except for the kneeling figure near the rear wall still radiating heat before the illuminated markings beneath the basalt. And according to the vibration logs attached to the final scan, the pulse inside the chamber no longer repeated every few seconds. It matched a normal human heartbeat almost exactly, 72 beats per minute. What unsettled researchers even more was that the heartbeat pattern occasionally accelerated briefly before stabilizing again as if responding to movement somewhere deeper beneath the chamber floor itself. No secondary chambers had ever appeared on radar scans, at least none publicly acknowledged. Today, tourists still visit the Giant's Causeway every year completely unaware of the sealed section of coastline further north where researchers allegedly entered the chamber beneath the basalt. Families take photographs across the volcanic columns, while guides explain the geological history of the cliffs and retell local myths connected to the coastline. Most visitors never notice the reinforced barriers still standing near the restricted section of rock, and even if they did, they would never know what archaeologists reportedly found behind the moving stone door. But according to one anonymous researcher connected to the expedition, the worst realization came long after the team escaped the chamber itself, because if the standing figures inside the chamber were only shells, then whatever once existed inside them may have already started leaving long before archaeologists ever entered the room at all. Then came the detail most researchers involved in the expedition refused to discuss publicly afterward. The smell, not decay, not moisture, not stagnant underground air. Several members of the team later described the chamber as smelling sterile somehow, clean. One archaeologist compared it to overheated electronics. Another reportedly said the air reminded him of hospital equipment left running too long inside a sealed room. That detail disturbed investigators later, because nothing beneath the Giant's Causeway should have smelled preserved. The chamber should have contained moisture, salt residue, mineral buildup, signs of geological aging. Instead, according to the leaked notes, almost no dust existed anywhere inside the structure at all. Even the floor near the standing figures appeared unnaturally clean, as if the chamber had not remained abandoned for thousands of years, as if something inside it had continued maintaining the environment long after the entrance sealed. Then one final discovery appeared briefly on the body cam footage during the team's retreat toward the exit. As the floodlights swung across the rear wall, one of the researchers accidentally illuminated a section of basalt near the glowing markings that had not been visible earlier. Additional impressions had been carved directly into the stone, not symbols, handprints, dozens of them, layered over each other across the wall surrounding the kneeling figure, some large, some smaller. And according to the thermal specialist reviewing the footage later, several of the handprints were still slightly warmer than the surrounding basalt itself. No explanation for that detail was ever officially recorded, but one member of the expedition later admitted the discovery completely changed how they interpreted the chamber, because until that moment, they still believed they were looking at something ancient and separate from humanity. After seeing the handprints, they became convinced the chamber had been used repeatedly. Not as a tomb, not as a prison, but as a place people had entered willingly long after the original structure already existed.